This video is brought to you by Envato. Hey there, my name's Daniel White, also known as Dansky. I'm a designer and instructor with Envato, and in this course we're going to be diving into Adobe Illustrator and we're going to be looking specifically at 3D. There's going to be things you should do, things you shouldn't do, and things you can also do to get the best end result possible. So first up, what we're going to do is look at how you can take an icon, a logo, a bit of text, whatever it is, and instantly turn it into a 3D graphic. So to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a nice simple icon, and you can of course do this with text or a logo or any graphic whatsoever. Right, let's remove that fill, and I'm going to thicken up that stroke just so we can see what we're doing. And let's pop it in the center. Right, let's duplicate this down. This is going to be an eyedropper icon, but this can of course be anything you like. Let's extend that down. Right, so you can see the stroke changing size there. Now, that is because I have this option checked here. So from the transform panel, make sure you uncheck scale, strokes, and effects. Otherwise, when you adjust the scale of your shapes, those stroke properties are going to change as well. So if we now go back to, we'll go for 8. Even if I scale up my shape, those strokes aren't going to change weight, which is excellent. Right, so with the direct selection tool, I'm going to delete this bottom segment here. Grab the pen tool, click on this point, and go down here, hold shift. I think something like this. Then what I can do, actually I'm going to delete this right side with the direct selection tool. And what we can do now is if I press O for the reflect tool, I can hover over a central point, hold Alt or Option and click. And I can now reflect this horizontally or vertically. Because I've done one side, there's no need for me to do the other side again. I'm just going to get perfect symmetry now by reflecting what I've already done vertically. So there we go, we've got the two halves. Fantastic. And if I select these bottom 2 points with the direct selection tool, I can press Command or Control J, and that will join them together. Whoops, let's not extend those there. Let's move this out. I'm just going to do the same again, just to join the top 2 points, and then using Shift with the arrow keys, I can nudge that back into position. Okay, now we just need one more rectangle. So I'm going to drag with Alt or Option and Shift. Really useful keyboard shortcut if you like to duplicate shapes. And we'll extend this up. I think maybe bring it in. So I'm just scaling from the sides, holding Alt or Option, so it scales from both sides equally. Right, now let's make this a bit more interesting. Let's make it a bit more curvy. So I'm going to select it, press A, again for the direct selection tool, and we're going to round off some of these corners. So we'll do this for the bottom there. Now I'm going to select, let's deselect, and then select one. I'm going to hold Shift, and I can select all 4 of these corner widgets, and then I can turn those straight lines. Oh, look at that, into a lovely smooth curve. I love that trick. Very underrated technique. And again, with the direct selection tool, we can make some selections and modifications. So I'm just using the arrow keys here to thicken up this part of the pipette. And that way you don't distort the shapes or any of its corners. So now we can round off these ones as well. Let's curve it up a bit. Now I'm actually going to add like a break in here. But first of all, if I go into outline mode with Command or Control Y, you can see these aren't quite lined up. So smart guides are very useful at snapping different shapes together, but they don't always get it right. Or maybe it's me, I don't know. Maybe I'm just blaming the smart guides. Right, and you can see again now it's not snapping. And this is interesting. So go up to Window. So you can see I've got Snap to Pixel turned on. So it is snapping to the pixel grid. I've got my grid turned off, but regardless, it's still snapping to it. So what I'm going to do is turn on Snap to Point. That's going to snap anchor points together. And then we'll turn off Snap to Pixel. Snap to Pixel is very useful if you want like pixel perfect artwork and you're working with that sort of detail. Right now, we just don't need that. And as you can see, Snap to Point works beautifully. Okay, fantastic. So what I'm going to do now is if I shift this one out, I'm just going to delete this bottom segment here. And then on this one, I'm going to press C for the scissors tool, and you can find that in the toolbar on the left. And I'm going to make a cut somewhere around here. And now I've made a cut, I can actually select just this part here. And you can see if I delete, I can delete that segment of path. Now, just make sure you don't get any stray anchor points left over. You can see this little cupcake here is hiding. We don't want stray anchor points because that can cause all sorts of problems. Right, let's nudge that back into place. Oof, I've cut it a little bit short there, but that's not to worry. We can just select those points, Command or Control J, and we're good to go. Right, Command or Control Y to come out of outline mode. There we go, we've kind of stylized our icon a bit. I do like that. And one thing I am going to do though, everything's got like a curvy aesthetic, so I'm just going to select everything, go to stroke, and I'm going to round the cap off. You can see that square edge where I just made that cut now becomes rounded. So the whole thing just kind of fits together a bit more. And I'm actually going to grab the pencil tool now. Now, I'm using a trackpad and my hand isn't the steadiest. So what you can do if you're like me with a slightly unsteady hand, you can crank up the smoothness and this will enable you to draw like a professional. So let's try and draw a smooth wavy line. This is going to be some sort of liquid in our eyedropper tool. Now you can see that ain't great. Let's be honest, it's not great. But Illustrator does help me out a bit. In fact, we can even smooth this up a little bit more. And we'll try that again. And Illustrator is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting here. There we go, fantastic. That's not too bad. It could be worse. I could keep trying that over and over again. And what I can do now is I can actually go and obviously fine tune the position so everything is nice and smooth. This anchor point here is kind of sticking out. So if I just grab hold of it, you can see I can move it around. And again, snap it with those smart guides. So everything looks lovely and clean. And because all of this was created using strokes, what we can do is we've still got full control over that. So we can increase the stroke weight and we can adjust all of those properties like stroke and color. But anyway, we need to get back to 3D because we've created our icon now. And the whole purpose of this was to show you how quickly and easily you can take your 2D design work, whether it's an icon, a logo, some text, whatever it is, and instantly apply awesome looking 3D. So I'm going to grab this version here. That's my backup on the left there, just in case things go wrong. And first of all, what I'm going to do is go to Object and Expand. Now this will convert all of these strokes into a solid fill. So let's click OK. And again, if I go into outline mode, you can see we've got lots of different bits of geometry. Now, when converting this to 3D, we want to combine this together because it's just going to mitigate the chance that things go wrong. So we'll select all of these and then use the Pathfinder option here, Unite. This will combine all of those segments into a single shape. So we're stacking the deck in our favor, so hopefully things don't go wrong. So let's go and apply a color. Now you can apply any color you like. I'm going to sample my red here and I'll just create a copy of this one as well. Now I have my 3D panel docked over here. If you don't see it though, just go to Window and you can find 3D and Materials. And it might just take a second to open up. There we go. And we've got a few different options. We'll come back to Revolve a little bit later in the course, but for now we're going to start with Extrude. And what we can do is we can click that and we can adjust the extrusion depth. So we're going to keep it quite shallow. Now you can get weird and wonderful with this and you can twist it and all sorts if that's what you're going for. Yeah, as you can see, you can taper it off. These can be a lot of fun. But the easiest way to do this is to just grab this control point in the middle and rotate it freeform. And as you can see, we've now got a 3D icon and we can just rotate this around. Now we do have lots of rotation presets there. So if you were going for more of an isometric look, you could click on that. And we've even got bevel here as well. So if everything's just looking a little bit too hard around the edges, then what we could do is we could just round that off very slightly. And you can see we get a nice bevel effect as well. Now, one of the other things we can do here, well, actually first, we can bevel both sides. So it will apply that beveling to both sides, whether we rotate it round. So that's something I think we'll do. And we've also got materials as well. Now, you can control the roughness and the metallic, but in Illustrator with these 3D features, it's not going to have a dramatic impact. The engine here can't handle those shiny, reflective and metallic surfaces in the same way that perhaps other 3D software can. But there is a workaround, and like I say, we're going to come back to that a bit later in the course where we can kind of get a bit more out of Adobe's 3D tools. So we're not going to play around with that too much, but we can adjust the lighting. Now, lots of settings here. You can choose which direction the light's coming from, but to be honest, it's better to click this drop down and get a real-time preview because we can turn on ray tracing and the lighting can change quite dramatically. So we'll check this box here just so we don't have to keep clicking render. And you can see if I turn this off and back on, that's without ray tracing. That is with ray tracing. So when you're working with lighting, if your computer can handle it, I would recommend keeping it on. Because if I just click through these, you can see it does change quite considerably, especially with those two. And you can, of course, grab this and drag this around freely. And there's loads of options down here as well. So you can adjust the height of the light. You can adjust the rotation. So whichever direction you want that is going to highlight the icon in the best way possible. And you can even turn on shadows. So I don't find these shadows particularly great, but they will match whatever settings you set here. So if you go for like a really high light, of course, the shadow is going to be quite short. So I think with these shadows, when they work and you get them looking good, they do look really good, but not always. They don't always look great. Now, if your shadows are clipping and you can't, they look cut off, then just increase the bounds here. This is something that happens. So you might see this and your shadows look cut. Just drag that slider up and you should be good. So if I just zoom back out now, so you can see with very minimal effort and relative ease, I was able to take a 2D graphic and apply these awesome looking 3D effects. So that's one way that Illustrator does make it incredibly accessible to just introduce a bit of 3D into your work, even if you've got no prior 3D experience. If you're interested in an unlimited subscription where you can download millions of creative assets that you can use in your projects, I would definitely recommend checking out Envato. It's a platform that I've been using for years. It's a subscription where you just get everything included. Whatever it is, Envato has you covered. I would definitely recommend checking it out, and there will be a link in the description to do so. Okay, next up we're going to look at the 3D Classic feature, and whilst this has to some extent been superseded by the newer 3D features, 3D Classic can still be useful, and I'm going to show you exactly why in this example. So for this one here, you can see we have the word Lego. Now this isn't a font, it can be, but I've just created this using squares and rectangles, and at the moment this is, it's all grouped together. Now I'd like to make this isometric in style, but I still want control over all of the shapes, because with the previous 3D settings, you're limited by what you can create with those settings. So if you can't create exactly what you want with those sliders and that 3D panel, then you're kind of stuck. Whereas I still like to use 3D Classic because it gives me full control. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go to Effect. That's it, 3D materials. Now you can access the new 3D features all from here, but I'm going to go 3D Classic. We'll go with Extrude and Bevel again. There you go. This is the old panel for 3D. Very similar functionality, still useful for some things. Slightly different though. So from the position at the top, I'm going to choose isometric top. Okay. This is fine, but I kind of want it sloping upwards the other way. And there isn't actually a preset for that. So if you do come up against this and you want your text to be isometric, but the other way, a nifty little trick is to add a minus in this box here, tab down and remove the minus from that box. There you go. And you can see now it's kind of sloping the other way. And again, we can adjust the extrusion depth So we'll make it a bit more like a Lego block, which kind of makes sense. Now for the shading, you can go for, more realistic shading. It's not going to be as good as the ray tracing we just looked at, but I'm actually going to choose no shading. And this does look slightly terrible, but it will make sense in a moment, I promise. So we're going to keep everything like that. And we're going to click OK. Now, if I go into outline mode again, you can see this is just the same graphic with the same geometry, but I've applied an effect on top of it. So it hasn't actually changed the geometry. So I can't really work with this yet. You can see the effect over here, which is great. So I can edit it and delete it, but I want to go ahead and I want to be able to edit every kind of face of the text. So if I go up to Object and Expand Appearance, you can see it does this, which is a little bit crazy. However, yep, still grouped together. If I ungroup this, I've now got all of these individual letters. So what I'm going to do is hold Shift and use the arrow keys to nudge these out. I'm just going to separate them for a moment so I can work on them individually, and then I'll piece them back together afterwards. Right, now the reason I love this technique is because I can select this one here. And if I grab the shape builder tool over here, what I can do is I can combine these different individual segments into a single segment. So I've now got that one left face over here. And all of these individual shapes here, boom, I'm just going to combine this together. Now I've got the right side and the top surface of the letter there. I'm going to combine those. And this part here, what you can do in Illustrator is you don't have to drag through multiple segments. You can actually just single left click. So let's go ahead and do that. And it doesn't look like anything's happened, but doing this will establish this as its own shape. So if I show you what I mean, it's still grouped together, but we can ungroup it again. And now I've got all of these individual pieces as individual shapes. And you can see in outline mode, the geometry matches as well. So this gives me full control. So if I select this one now, you can see I've got this lovely color here from the color picker. And let's go and change the color. For this side, we'll go for a slightly darker color. Nice. Okay. This one we'll leave as it is. And I think for the top, we'll say the top is being affected by the light source. So I'm going to make that a bit brighter. And then this one down here, that little segment, remember we shape builder tooled that on its own. I can use the eyedropper tool to just sample that same color. And the great reason why I love using this, as I say, is I still have full control over these as individual shapes. So what I could even do is I could actually go and apply a gradient. So we're not constrained by the limitations of the 3D features. This is now just a regular shape in Illustrator. So if I just quickly show you this, and we'll go and apply like a dark red there. And we'll go with a lighter one there. And then I could adjust this, adjust the rotation. And as you can see, if you'd like to go for something that simulates more realistic lighting, but you've got full control using the gradient tool and the gradient slider, then that is something that you could do as well. But for this example, I'm going to keep it to solid colors. So let's just go back a few steps. Yeah, I think that looks good. And I'm just going to go ahead and quickly do this for all of the others. Okay, so all grouped together. And now I should be able to nudge these back into the same position. Let's just try and get everything lined up. Yep, that looks about right. And we could scale this up. And as I say, we now have all of this, this text, these graphics, all in isometric format with everything, as you can see, as individual shapes, so I can fully customize everything if I need to. And I'm not limited by the sliders and the constraints of the 3D panel itself. This video is brought to you by Envato, the unlimited creative subscription. Find and download quality graphics, templates, photos, and fonts. Follow the link in the description and start creating now. Okay, for this next one, we're going to look at logo design. So you may have seen those logos that kind of have like a pattern and it's almost wrapped around a sphere. And you think, how do you create that? It can't be that hard. It really isn't actually, once you know the trick. So that's what we're going to cover in this next one. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start by creating a little pattern. So I'm going to create a circle by selecting the ellipse tool, clicking and dragging, holding Shift, press D for the default black and white colors, remove the fill and thicken up the stroke. So we just need a circle. This will do for now. And what I'm going to do is switch into outline mode with Command or Control Y and drag with Alt Option and Shift so it snaps to the edge. And then I'm going to hold Shift and press the right arrow key once. So we're just going to repeat that a few times. Duplicate, snap, hold Shift, and then nudge the right arrow key, just so all of these are an equal distance apart. And I'm going to select them all and do the same vertically as well. So I need that distance both vertically and horizontally between these different rows and columns to be exactly the same. Okay, so we've got lots of circles. Let's try and pop those in the center. Where is the center? There you go. And what we're going to do now is use a script to combine these into an interesting pattern. And we're going to be using something called Metaball. And I'll add a link to the description if you'd like to have a go at trying this out. It's a lot of fun. So what I can do is select these two circles, go to File, and then we're going to go down to Scripts, go Other Script. And you can see I've got the Metaball arc on the desktop. And we'll select that, turn on Preview. And you can, of course, adjust the angle depending on how steep or subtle you'd like your Metaball shape to be. The Metaball is kind of like where you have those two circles and they're connected with a curve. You'll see it in a bit more detail in a minute. But that's good for me. Let's click OK. And if I zoom in, you can see this is what the geometry looks like. So I could select this now and then unite that from the Pathfinder panel. And we have a lovely smooth Metaball, which is fantastic. Now I could go and do that again for lots of different ones, but we would be here all day. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate this with Alt or Option. And I'm just going to replace a couple of these existing circles with a few more Metaballs, just to make the pattern a bit more interesting. So we'll go one there. We need another one here. So I'm just removing the original circle and then adding in the Metaball instead. And we'll have another one here. Now, if you're not sure if it's snapping perfectly, what I would do is select the existing circles and align to them, just so you know that everything is perfectly in position. Otherwise, the pattern might break and not work correctly. So we'll take those bottom two out and we'll pop another one there. Now, feel free to have fun with this section and just create your own Metaball-like pattern. And what I can do now is just select all of these shapes, press Shift M for the Shape Builder tool, and we're going to go whoa, all the way through all of them. And we've combined that into a single multi-metaballed shape. Right, let's turn this into a pattern. So let's select everything and press Shift X on the keyboard and we'll swap that stroke for a fill. And now with the eyedropper tool, let's just go ahead and apply some colors to the different shapes. Okay, so there we go. We have a lovely pattern. And what we can do now is select it, and I could rotate this holding Shift 45 degrees. Something like this. I'm going to pop it over here and just make it a wee bit smaller. and then drag a copy with Alt or Option and Shift. The version on the left is going to be, again, the backup, just in case things go wrong. Command or Control G to group everything together. There we go, just so it all moves around together. And what I'm going to do now to create this kind of 3D effect, and you'll see this with a lot of different logos, they'll have this kind of rounded shape, this aesthetic that looks really clean and simple, but is actually quite tricky to create unless you know the trick. And the trick is going up to Effect, down to Warp, and we're going to choose Fisheye. Now you can play around with all the different warp effects. I would definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun. We're going to use Fisheye, and we're probably going to go for... Oh, let's have a look. I think we'll go for about 85. I want this to be like circular. Now, again, as you can see, we've got the effect over here. This is still an effect. So the geometry is still kind of exactly as it was. I need to edit the geometry of this. So what I'm going to do is go to Object, Expand Appearance. And there you go. You can see that the geometry now matches exactly what we're seeing. And this has turned out really well, actually. It does look pretty cool. I don't want to sound too surprised, but yeah, that was pretty good. However, you can see we've got a little bit of weird distortion on these endpoints. So for this logo in particular, or this graphic that will become a logo, I'm going to manually correct this. So I will ungroup this so they're all individual shapes, and I'm just going to manually switch out some of the ones that didn't warp as smoothly as I would have liked. So we'll get rid of this one and put this one here in its place. Much better. So we're just going to replace that top and bottom as well. And we'll create another one at the bottom there. Nudge that in. There we go. That looks much better. Now we could leave this as a circle, a sphere-like shape. I'm going to be creative and just take a few pieces away, all in the name of creativity, to try and make it a bit more quirky and a bit more interesting. So there we go. We've got this sort of sphere-type logo with part of it removed. It's going rather well, so I'm going to throw you over there. I think we're good now. Let's create a shape with the rectangle tool. And we're going to pick a nice dark-ish background color, something like that. Now we're going to send this to the back. So I would definitely recommend using not these options, arrange. There we go. I was thinking, where's the keyboard shortcuts? These keyboard shortcuts are definitely worth learning because it just enables you to kind of send things forwards and backwards with a few clicks. Much quicker and easier. Right, let's snap this rectangle so it fills the entire artboard. Command or Control 2 to lock that in place so we don't accidentally move the background all over the place. T for the type tool. We're going to type logo. I'm sure you can come up with something much more interesting. And feel free to create your own pattern and use your own colors for this step as well. I'm going to go with good old white. I've got a font in mind as well, Outfit. But I think any kind of nice, clean sans serif font will look good. Oh, logo. There we go. In fact, let's type Metaball instead. That's a little bit more interesting. Logo wasn't the most creative name you could have come up with, Dan. Let's be honest. Right, I'm going to group everything together now. Scale it down. And there we go. We could do that. And we could even be a bit more creative, and we'll take the word ball and we'll apply a color just to kind of tie the two things together. So these are those kinds of logos that I've seen them. I'm sure you've seen them as well. And they kind of have this aesthetic to them. They're kind of rounded in shape, and they look like they would be easy to create. And then when you try and create them, they're not always that easy. But this is how you can use the fisheye warp effect in particular to create that 3D aesthetic. Right, next up, we're going to use the blend tool for a bit of 3D. Now, this tool is incredibly useful. It's not exclusively used for 3D, but it can be a lot of fun. So we've got the word bet flicks there. That's definitely not riffing on an existing well-known brand. And what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to apply the red color up here. And what I'm going to do is drag with Alt or Option to create a copy. Now, I'm not just going to drag anywhere like this. I'm going to hold Shift. So we're going in a diagonal line. So it's a bit more methodical. And then with the eyedropper tool, I'm going to select this dark color here, very dark reddish brown color. And if I select both of these, what I can do is go to Object, down to Blend, and choose Make. And I've got the keyboard shortcut here as well, Command or Control, Alt or Option, and B. Now, it makes a blend, but it's not very interesting. So if we double click on the blend tool itself, and you can use this tool to make the blend as well, I just find it a little bit fiddly. You can see we've got smooth color by default. What we're going to do is change that to specified steps. Now we've got one. And if I use the up arrow key to gradually increase this, you can see what happens. So it's creating a blend, a live blend between these two objects. Now this doesn't have to be text, this can be any object, it can be some lines you've drawn, and I would definitely encourage you to experiment because this tool is a lot of fun. So what I'm going to do is actually crank this up to some ridiculous number, and this will depend on how powerful your computer is as to how much it can handle, but it's going to give me a much smoother blend. And as I mentioned, this is a live blend. So at the moment we have a blend group, so it moves around together. But if I double click to go inside, I can still select each of the words or the shapes individually, and I can change all of their properties. So if I make this one smaller, you can see the blend changes in real time, which is amazing. Or I could move it over here, or I could move it up there. So, and with those 400 steps, you can probably see my computer is somewhat struggling, but we'll keep going, fingers crossed. And we could even try and swap those colors around. So if I select this one here, and we'll go and paste that in on the bottom one. So we'll paste it in there. And you can double click to come out of the blend group. That's a nice quick shortcut. So I'm just copying these colors, their 6-digit hex value, and then pasting them back in. Double click anywhere to come out. Nice. So you can see that you can choose which way you'd like the gradient to run. And something else I can do is I can double click to go inside, select this top text here, Command or Control C to copy, come back out, Command or Control F that will paste it in front and in place. And then let's change the color again. And there you go. You can see we've got this lovely 3D style effect. And if I grab the rectangle tool, and again, we're just going to use this to make a background that fills the entire artboard. So I'll pop you down there, send you to the back. I've actually got a gradient prepared up here as well. So if you want to download the project files and follow along, that will be there for you. It's essentially just a blend of the light red and the dark red. I just kind of made it in advance. And of course we can adjust the angle. So we'll have the lighter color a bit more localized to the top right. And then I might switch those colors back round actually. Let's just quickly switch them back round. I'm just going to nudge that one out of the way, which makes it a bit easier to get to the one underneath. There we go. And this one on top, I could make it a bit lighter. Or I could add a gradient to this one as well, just to make it even more interesting. Seeing as we're introducing gradients and having slightly more realistic lighting, let's make this one a little bit brighter. Oh, we could even introduce a bit of orangey color into it, which is quite nice actually, just to make it a bit more creative. We can adjust the angle again. So that lighter color, I'm going to push that over to the sort of top right area so it mimics where the light is coming from and kind of matches the other elements in the design. I think we'll keep that nice and light. And then what I can do now is we'll scale this up. And we'll pop it in the center. And we could go in and, as I say, fine tune this even more. You know, this is a live blend. So we could just move that down there and have the 3D effect coming from the bottom. Or we could try moving it up top. Yeah, there's loads of things you could do with it. You could make it shorter and a bit more subtle. Or you could have it a bit longer. It's entirely up to you. I'm going for this sort of long effect right now. Now you can go to view and trim view, and we can kind of see how it looks with all the excess around the side. But it won't necessarily, like that doesn't actually remove it from the design. It's not actually cropped. It's just a view. So if you want to kind of get rid of all this excess around the edge, what you could do is take the background rectangle, copy it, Command or Control F, bring it all the way to the front. So we have this rectangle here now that we're using, and we're going to use that as a clipping mask. So with the rectangle selected and the blend group, I'm going to go to Object, Clipping Mask and Make. Shortcut is Command or Control 7. And it's now going to crop that inside that rectangle. So the rectangle and all of its color will be essentially consumed to create a clipping mask. And I can send that back. So I've got this element here on its own, this element on its own, and I've got the background on its own. It's 3 elements, and there's nothing extending beyond the bounds of the artboards. So it keeps everything nice and clean. Okay, so next up we have the mesh tool. Now I don't really recommend learning this one because 1, it's got an insanely steep learning curve, and 2, there's just better 3D options out there. And when you work with 3D objects, you can spin them around and rotate them. With the mesh tool, you're kind of simulating 3D, and we'll do some proper 3D a bit later in the course where we're actually modeling in Illustrator. But I'm just going to show you the mesh tool regardless, because if you do want to have a play around with it, it can be a lot of fun, but I just don't think it's practical nowadays with so many new 3D features and platforms available. But regardless, here is the mesh tool. So you can see I've created a circle already, and what I'm going to do is select this, go and grab the mesh tool, and I can click here and apply a point, and I could go and click and apply one here as well. And what I can do with the mesh tool or with the direct selection tool, I can click on these individual points, press I for the eyedropper tool, and then I could sample a color for that point. So down here, I could select some of these points around the edge and then sample this color. And you can see it gives me that darker color around the edge. Now, this point here, I kind of want to find a color that is a bit darker, but not too dark. So what I can do is hold down Shift with the eyedropper tool, and I can try sampling different colors from around the shape. So I can gradually kind of slowly head towards that darker color without going too far. So let's apply a little bit more. And I could go and apply some slightly darker colors there as well. And maybe on this side, remember I'm holding Shift and using the eyedropper tool. And then I can select this and I can edit this color with the direct selection tool. Just, well, however you like, really. And as you can see, it's very easy to make a 3D looking sphere, and you can get much more realistic results with the mesh tool, but the learning curve is incredibly steep. And there's just other tools and features that are much better suited for 3D, because the main thing now is essentially this is a 2D shape trying to simulate 3D by applying colors to different places. and there's just better tools, even in Illustrator. In fact, we'll come on to some better 3D techniques in a moment that, in my opinion, have just superseded what the mesh tool can do. But if you do have a play with the mesh tool and you create something amazing, that's awesome. But something else you can also do, if you've created a graphic and you've applied all these colors and you think, oh, actually, I want to change the color. You don't want to go and click on all the points and change them manually. You can go to Edit, Edit Colors, Recolor Artwork. And this does make it very quick and easy to change the color like this. But you can still keep a lot of the shading that you've already done. So there we go. I can change that to a red one. Or you can reset that back to how it was before. So it just kind of saves you having to go and select every individual point and change the color manually. You can just kind of do it in one fell swoop. But anyway, yeah, if you want to have a play around, that is the mesh tool. Okay, so this next one is probably my favorite part of this course because we're going to be designing a 3D icon in Adobe Illustrator. However, you're going to see the limitations of Illustrator's features when it comes to getting decent looking 3D icons. But we're going to smash those limitations by then jumping into Adobe Dimension, and we're going to get a result that is 1,000 times better than anything you can create natively within Illustrator. Okay, this next one is probably one of my favorites in this course, and this is how to make way better 3D icons in Illustrator. So for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a 3D notification bell icon. But first of all, we need to actually create the model in Illustrator. And we used the 3D extrude feature earlier. Now we're going to check out revolve. So what I'm going to need to do first of all is create half of a bell. So I'm going to grab the pen tool, but you can of course do this with many different tools. And I'm going to try and draw half a bell. And I've actually got a reference image here as well. So we'll keep that handy. We're just going to go down. Something like this. Maybe a bit lower. And then we're going up. And down. And rather than trying to draw the kind of dingly dangly bit, I'm not sure what that part of the bell is called. The bit that hits the inside of the metal and goes dong. Whatever it's called. We're not going to do that manually with the pen tool. We're just going to use the ellipse tool. And we're just going to close that path by selecting those 2 points, Command or Control J to close them. Now this is a bit rough around the edges as well, so I think I might just refine that a little bit. So let's just try and get this looking as good as possible. You can see it doesn't want to snap there, which isn't ideal. So I'm just going to nudge it together. Now, if you've got these 2 points and they're determined not to snap and you need them to be aligned, what we can do, actually, I'm going to delete this segment. We can select these 2 points. So this is an amazing feature. If you don't know this, you'll love this. Just for peace of mind, choose average, leave both checked. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull these 2 points together. So now you know that they are exactly on top of each other, and then you can Command or Control J to join them both. So, okay, we're just seeing this weird thing now because it's trying to kind of close the path with a fill. So we're going to swap that to a stroke and we'll give it a color for now. We just need to get the line work looking good first, and it doesn't really look great right now, especially down here. So we're going to refine this first of all, because this will affect how good the end result is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select these 3 points, copy, Command or Control C, Command or Control F to paste. I'm going to move them over. I don't need that bit at the top there. O for the reflect tool, hold Alt or Option and click, and I can reflect that vertically. And I think I'm going to just delete this actually. That didn't turn out particularly well. So we're going to, whoops, move both of these over. And we'll try and do this with a bit more precision. So I'm going to drag this point into here. We'll drag this one. I can also extend it with the pen tool. Something like that, maybe. Yeah, even this arc at the top, that didn't turn out too great, actually. I should have probably stayed away from the pen tool. We've got the arc tool here. The arc tool will save the day. There we go. Much, much better. Okay. So. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to bring that down so it lines up there. But then maybe move this one over. Let's delete that. I'm going to use this shape here. And we'll try something like this. And this is quite tricky. It will make sense in a minute when I use the revolve feature, but you almost have to like think about the object you're trying to create. To use the revolve feature, it has to kind of be sort of somewhat symmetrical as well, because it will revolve this shape in a 360-degree motion. So you've got to kind of think of the graphic you're trying to create like a two-dimensional slice of it. And the slice is what you want to create. So I promise it will make sense in a minute when you see the revolve in action. But at the moment, I'm just trying to create half. And this line kind of represents that half. So everything to the right of it, that will be gone. Right, let's try and shape builder tool this. We'll see how it looks. So we're going to drag through there. We'll capture that down there. I'm going to Alt Option and drag. I can use the shape builder tool to subtract. We can click on these little points that have kind of overlapped as well and trim those off. Yeah, that could be good. I'm just going to check there's no stray anchor points underneath. So we're just going to do, there you go. You can see, always worth checking. We definitely don't want that captured in our 3D because it just can cause unnecessary confusion. And what I'm going to do now is select this and press A, and then I can now actually like adjust this a little bit. So we can curve some of these off. So if you don't understand what this is so far, this bit down here, this is half of the dingly dongly bit of the notification bell. This bit here is like the outer rim, and then this up here is like the main body. All of this empty space here is essentially the inside of the bell. So I could even take this up. I could move these anchor points up a bit higher. It just kind of, you're not really going to see that, but it just depends how much kind of empty space you'd like in the bell. Okay, right, I'm feeling somewhat confident. We'll try this one. Shift X to swap that stroke to a fill. I've got my color up here, but you can of course make the bell any color you like. And right, let's go ahead and try this. So we're going to go to that 3D panel again. Go back to Object, and we're going to choose Revolve. Now, by default, it revolves around the left edge, which looks like, yeah, some sort of strange pot type thing. But we're going to revolve this around the right edge. There we go. It's yeah, not turned out too bad, and we can obviously get a look inside the bell there. There you go. So hopefully you can sort of see the 2D wireframe overlaid as I'm hovering over it. So it's essentially revolved it in a 360-degree motion, and you can actually bring that down. So if I undo a second, so go back to how it was, you can sort of see it coming together. So there's our almost 2D one, and what revolve does is it does this. So hopefully that makes everything make a bit more sense. I'll turn ray tracing off for now just so my computer doesn't melt. But that is essentially what Revolve does. So you can use it to create, like, if you want to create a vase or a pot or something like a notification icon, makes it very quick and easy to do that. Now, we could do the top part of the bell as well, the kind of little ring that you could attach it to. That's usually there. And we could adjust the angle here as well, and we could fine tune the lighting and everything. But I'll be honest with you, even with all of these settings, like I said earlier, you are limited by what you can do here. And what you can do in this panel is great. You can do a lot. But compared to some other 3D applications, the color in particular on here is just not great. It looks dirty, washed out. The lighting introduces a lot of black, whereas I would want to be able to control the colors a bit more, and I can't do it from this panel. So you can do a lot. Sometimes you can make things look great, but I need to be able to have a bit more control over this. And that is where Adobe Dimension comes in. Now, I'm pretty sure this is free if you've got a Creative Cloud subscription. If you've never used it before, don't worry, it's got a very simple and clean user interface, and it's going to enable us to take our 3D models from Illustrator to the next level. Like, honestly, it's not even close. So what we're going to do is we'll turn off ray tracing, go back to Object, and we're going to export this as a 3D model. So let's do that from here. And the format we're going to go for, there's lots of different ones. You can try OBJ, but the one I'm going to use is USDA, just because I've had the fewest amount of issues. We're going to export this. Desktop is fine. There we go. And if I go to the desktop now, you can see in this folder, I've got asset 1, and I'm going to call this Bell. And then what we're going to do is switch over to Adobe Dimension. It's this green icon here. And let's go create new. Or we could start by just dragging a model there. So we've got a new document. Let's go to File, Import, and I'm going to import a 3D model. USDA folder, and there is the bell. So let's drop that in there. You can see it's dropped it below the plane. That's fine though. We can bring it up here. So super quick crash course introduction to how to navigate this. You've got the different axes here. We've got the X, Y, and Z, or Z from my American friends axes. That is represented by the different colors, the red, green, and the blue. Now the circles, they rotate. The arrows, they move. And the cubes, I should say, they scale. And the colors correspond to the different axes. Or you can just grab the circle in the middle there and move it around. Now, if you do get lost and you end up going over here, you can press F and it will snap back to the selected object. So to move the camera around, you can press 1 to orbit. You can press 2 to pan, and 3 to dolly. Now, dollying is like kind of moving the camera closer or further away. So by moving the camera, we're not actually moving the position of the object, we're just moving the camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and adjust. Actually, no, I'm not going to adjust the position yet because I need to add the top. Now, over here on the left, you can see we've got lots of assets. So we've got models, we've got materials, which we'll come back to. We've got lighting, and we've got images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a torus. And that is essentially like a ring, a donut shape. And we've got a few properties over here. So we could adjust the pipe radius. I'll go for 3 centimeters. And this is a property inspector on the right, very similar to many other Adobe apps like Illustrator. So whatever you select, you'll see properties on the right-hand side. So I'm just going to scale this down. There we go. I'm going to orbit the camera up and rotate this 90 degrees. So we're going to go for a top-down view here. And we're going to move this on top. So we'll add this to the top of the bell. You can see it snaps nicely there. And then I can move this up. Remember, press F if you need to recenter. I think that looks pretty good. It's a bit big. Let's just bring it down a wee bit. Maybe there. I think that looks okay. Now it doesn't match the material, and we could match that using their own eyedropper tool here, the sampler. But as I say, this material is not particularly nice, and that's the one that's come straight in from Illustrator. So first of all, from the scene, I'm going to open up the bell and I'm going to drag the torus inside there. So they're kind of in the same group. And then what I'm going to do is go to the Materials tab here. Now, this is where you can have a lot of fun. We've got glass that we'll come back to. We've got metal. Just to show you why we're doing this as well. If I start with a metal one, I'm going to drag this material onto the folder and it will apply it to every object in the folder. And as you can see already, we haven't even turned on ray tracing, and you can see Adobe Dimension can handle reflections, roughness, metallic surfaces way better than Illustrator's 3D can. And I can turn on ray tracing now. And you can see it's not even close. It can handle this so much better. So if we go for default, we can get a nice kind of plasticky look. So we'll drag that onto the folder. There we go. Now to change this, I need to go inside the folders and actually select an object. Now, because I applied that material to the entire folder, if I change one object, it will update on all of them. So let's go into the material. Now you can break that link. So if I wanted to edit the ring on top independently of the bit underneath, but we don't want to. We want it to all be the same kind of yellowy orange color. Oh, look at that. Look at that coloring. Much better already. Okay. And you can see it applies it to both the torus, that ring along the top, and the Illustrator mesh as well. And if I go down here, we've got properties for the roughness and the metallic, just like we had in Illustrator, but the difference here is these will actually have a much more, a much better impact on the end result. The sliders in Illustrator, they just don't really do anything, to be honest. Whereas if I drag roughness all the way to the left, this is going to be like a much more reflective, glossy surface, like a plastic. If I drag it to the right, it's going to be matte, so very non-reflective. Same with metallic. If I drag this all the way to the right, very, very metallic. So I might introduce a little bit of metallic. So it's kind of got a slightly metal feel, and I'm going to keep the roughness low as well. So it's nice and reflective. So maybe something like this looks good. Let's turn off ray tracing. And now what I'm going to do is orbit the camera. So we're going to try and move the camera around, or what we can do is leave the camera where it is. And we can select the bell. And then I'm going to press, what's the keyboard shortcut? There we go. V on the keyboard to get back to all of these different transform controls. And now I can just freely rotate this and get an angle that looks good. So we're going to maybe something like this. I just need to kind of rotate it up a bit more so you can see a bit more inside the bell. It's a little bit fiddly, just trying to, I can rotate the camera as well, remember. So we're going to be rendering this based on what the camera is seeing. So as long as I get things looking right, that's the important thing. So maybe we'll go for that. And then the torus on the top. We could rotate that around. So I could spend ages getting this perfect. So I've got the angle looking pretty good there. Let's turn on ray tracing again and just kind of get a good look at how the end result will look. And if I switch back to Illustrator for a second, and turn on ray tracing, you can see the difference. It's gone from this to this very quickly and easily. And there's still more we could do here as well. We haven't even got to lighting yet. We could change the color of the lighting. So let's just play around with some different lights. Yeah, we could have 3-point. We could go with circle. Whoops. As you can see, I've just added a lot of different lights. So we'll just keep it simple for now. So we could just have an environment light, or we could add an image light, or just have a key light. So we can turn those off and on, and we can actually select them and change the color of the light as well. So if I were to make this a bit more orangey and bump up the intensity, you can see that this is now going to affect the material as well. And if I choose a fill light, you can see the fill light is affecting this side as well. So if I want to try and remove some of those darker shadows, those murky black shadows, I can add like another orangey kind of tint coming from that left side. And you can see it then adds that orange to this side. So it kind of warms it up. So you can use lighting as well as the material color to kind of try and remove some of those darker black shadows. And now I can see that with all these lights, the reflection is a bit more noticeable. So this is where I might just bump up the roughness just to get everything looking a bit less reflective. So I'm pretty happy with that. Everything's looking great. You can leave ray tracing on, get a good preview. But then once you're done, it's time to, well, save everything first of all, just in case something goes wrong. And then we can go to render. Ray tracing, absolutely preset. I'm going to go for high because I'm a cheeky chicken. Samples, you know, that is a lot. You could drop it down, but we're going to get a super high res output. Now, I would go with a PSD just because you get a layered PSD and you can kind of have a bit more control. Save it to the desktop, give it a name. And if you have a specific file size you want to render out, then you can choose that as well. So if you were to bump this up, you would get a higher quality end result. But let's go ahead and click render, and hopefully this won't take too long. Okay, so there we go. The render has finished. And if we go and open up the PSD file in Photoshop, I'm going to do the comparison again because it's just night and day. That is our Illustrator render. And that is our Photoshop render. And that's just me doing it quickly. You can, of course, fine-tune the materials and the settings and get it looking exactly how you want. And to me, the difference is not even close. And here we've got the background. We've got the rendered image there with the denoised effect. We've got one with a bit more noise, depending on what you're going for. And I can go and change the background color as well. So I could kind of go and add in a different color. We've got the shadow there as well, which is part of that layer. So if we want to, we could just go and remove that if you want to get rid of the shadow. And you can turn the background off, and then you've got this icon there on its own transparent layer. So what we could do now is, if I convert this to a smart object, and then crop this. I'll try trim. Where's trim, trim, trim? Okay, so the shadow's causing a few issues there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a manual selection with the marquee tool. There we go. Let's just crop it there. There we go. We've got the icon cropped. Now we can go to File, Export. Quick export as PNG. It will export this with transparency as well. Go Bell. And there we go. We've got that as a transparent PNG that we can then go and use on a website or as part of a project, whatever it is. And as you can see, it is 1,000 times better than what Illustrator was able to generate natively. And for the last one, what we're going to do is we're going to do some more 3D modeling, specifically a bottle, and then we're going to apply a realistic glass effect. Then we're going to take a vector graphic created in Illustrator and apply that as a label to the bottle. Honestly, this one is fantastic. And if you are using Dimension or Illustrator to create mockups, this is how you get the most realistic mockups possible. So for this one, we're going to create a bottle. So you can see I have a wine graphic here. This is something I downloaded from Envato Elements, which I would definitely recommend checking out because they have millions of creative assets. You get unlimited downloads. This is the wine label that I've downloaded. And as you can see, they've got lots of different categories. Honestly, you get everything within your subscription. It's endless. I've been using this for years and I'm not going to be stopping anytime soon because it's just absolutely marvelous. So this is a wine graphic in vector format, which is great because as you can see, I've gone in and changed the text and we've got my birth year there. Yes, I am 38 years old. And I'm going to throw this off to one side. We'll come back to that in a minute because I'm going to create a bottle. And to do this, what I'm going to do is grab the rectangle tool. And I've got a little reference off camera that is a rather aesthetically pleasing bottle shape. But we're going to do this nice and quick using basic shapes. Again, it could be very tempting to use the pen tool. But as you saw with the bell, not always the best idea. And if you want to do a better job of this, then use a reference image of a real bottle. I would definitely recommend it. Okay, I'm just going to change the color just so you can see the different segments. Now we're just doing this with rectangles. I'm going to drag this down. And then we're going to do one more for the body. Let's snap that there. Now I'm going to press S for the scale tool and I can hold shift and scale out. And let's just zoom in. There we go. Okay, so that doesn't look much like a bottle yet, but there's a few more things we can do with it. So with the scale tool, you can actually select individual points. So I've just got these top two selected. I'm going to press S for the scale tool, hold shift, and I can now scale these 2 points individually. So I'm going to bring this out slightly. And then for the neck of the bottle, just those the bottom 2 points, we'll select those. With the scale tool, pull those out. Now that doesn't necessarily look like a wine bottle yet. That's what I'm going for. It looks more like some sort of spirit, to be honest. But this is why I like to use basic shapes rather than pen tooling, is I can select this now. We'll make all this the same color. And I'm going to combine all of these into a single shape. And if I press A for the direct selection tool, I can now round off all of these corners individually. That doesn't really look like a wine bottle either, does it? Let's start with these ones. Nope, that's not a wine bottle either. Okay, let's undo that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try moving these down. So we're going to move them down there. Okay. Let's try again. Hopefully this gives me a slightly better result. There we go. Much better. Now the red lines indicate that it won't be, I can't round this off anymore. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to probably scale this out, maybe lengthen it. I want it to be more of a wine bottle and less of some sort of spirit. We'll select the bottom two. I'm going to round those off ever so slightly, just because even a glass wine bottle isn't perfectly sharp. So we're going to do the same up here as well. I'm just going to round some of these corners off just a teeny tiny bit, just because it's going to make the end result much more realistic. Unless you are going for something that is incredibly sharp, then I would just round them off ever so slightly. Right, that looks pretty good. So that is our two-dimensional wine bottle. Now, to revolve this, we only need half. So the easiest way to do this is to grab the rectangle tool, find that central point, we'll drag over that with a shape. I'll just give it any color for now, it doesn't matter. We're going to select both the bottle and the shape on top. You must make sure that the big shape is on top because we're going to use this shape to knock out that half of the bottle. So before we used unite from the Pathfinder panel, now we're going to use minus front. And you can think of this as subtract. So if I click this, boom, you can see it just chops out that right half. And we're now left with just the left. So let's move you over there. And now we're going to go and revolve this. Now again, it's gone around the left edge, which is interesting, but we're going to revolve that around the right edge. And there we go. We actually have our bottle. Now, when you do this, it might look good. It might not look good. It doesn't matter. The great thing is that we can actually still go and edit this. So I can still edit the two-dimensional geometry and you can see how these changes happen. So I can actually go and maybe thicken this up. Or if I wanted to adjust the neck of the bottle and make it a bit taller. That's a little bit more like a milk bottle, but we'll go for a longer neck there. Let's bring that in a little bit. Yeah, so I could spend all day doing this. I think maybe I'll lengthen it a tiny bit. Okay, there we go. Right, that's good. There's my wine bottle. So I've got the 3D model. So with glass, at the moment, this is going to be transparent, like a glass effect. At the moment, it's just this single line, and so the glass won't have any thickness whatsoever to it. So when you think about light traveling through glass, a bottle has some sort of thickness to it. You're going to get refraction, which is where the light kind of enters and then bounces off in different directions, etc. So to get realistic looking glass, we need to add some thickness, some density to the bottle, so that when we add the glass effect, the glass has that same density or thickness. It'll hopefully make more sense when I show you in a minute. It's tricky to explain. So what I'm going to do is in Illustrator, I'm going to remove this right-hand line, select the shape, go to Object, Path, and Offset Stroke. Sorry, Offset Path. We're going to add a little bit of thickness. Now, I don't want the glass to be way too thick, but I just want it to have some sort of density. So I think we'll try 7. And you can see it's applied that offset to both sides. Now I only need one side. So I'm going to go around and just delete all of these points because it will apply that offset to both sides of the line. So let's delete that there. And then I'm going to connect these points. And again, this might seem strange if you've not worked with this particular Revolve 3D feature before. But again, we're thinking about it as a two-dimensional cross-section of what we want to create. And because we're going to be using glass and you're going to see through it, it's going to make a difference setting it up like this versus this. If it was like plastic like we did before, doesn't matter because you're not going to see anything through the surface. And on the surface, they do look the same. But I'm going to export these now rather than mess around with them in Illustrator. I'm going to export them now, but we'll do 2 different ones. So we've got that one there. Let's remove you. And we're going to have this one here. So we're going to have bottle. Well, no, we're going to call it, I was going to say bottle bad. We'll go glass bad. And glass. Good. Okay, right. We're going to export these in the USDA format. Export. And now if we jump into Dimension, right, let's go and create a new document. And let's import these models. So we've got two of them. We've got glass bad. Where is glass good? Ah, I only selected it. Whoops. Let's get you in there as well. Okay, so we've got glass bad and glass good. Let's get those in. And again, I'm just going to bring them up. There we go. So they sit on the surface. Right, so we're going to hide glass good for now, and we'll start with glass bad. Now, if I go over to the materials section, you can see we've got glass right at the top. So let's drag that straight onto the folder. And I'm going to turn on ray tracing just so you can see. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to glass good. Now let's apply that glass effect to this bottle. And there you can see, if I just let this render for a second, even around the edge, you can see that the glass and around the bottom, it's got like a rim and it just has more density. And that's because we modeled it with glass, the transparency and the thickness all in mind. So we just get a much better result. If I turn this one on, glass bad, and just slide this over here and let them both render for a second, you should be able to see the difference. Yeah, like it's immediately obvious. And we can go and play with the lighting and the material and fine tune all of that if you want to remove the reflections. But what we'll do now is we'll turn off glass bad. I'm just going to deselect ray tracing for a minute. We'll go into glass good, select the mesh, and we can of course go to the material and we could change the color. So if you don't want just standard glass, we could go and add more of a wine glass style color. So just changing the base color for this particular material isn't the right option. And this is where different materials have different properties. So let's try this one. So the specular edge color. Emission. So we've got a few different colors here. So glass is a little bit more complicated than just changing just the base color. We've got the interior, the absorption color. Let's turn off ray tracing for a minute. And we've got the coat color as well. So let's try and introduce a wine bottle-y color to all of these options. I'm sure there's one that's having more of an impact than the other. Coat opacity. There we go. That seems to be the one. So if we drag that up, and you've got roughness specifically for the coat as well. And we've got the index of refraction for the coat. So lots and lots of settings for this glass material. But the reason that we're bringing this into Dimension is because we not only get much more photorealistic results, but because we want to add the graphic. So I've made my lovely custom graphic in Illustrator. I can select the whole thing grouped together, export selection, and we'll export it. And I think it's gone there. So we'll call this label. And then in Dimension, what I can do, so you've got lots of images here. If I select this, I'm going to go to File, Import, Place Material on Selection. Right. No, this isn't the material. So we need to select the mesh again. This is where folders and meshes can get a bit confusing. Go to Import, Place Image on Model, not Material. Okay, now I've got my label. And what it's going to do is it's going to wrap this around. I'm going to turn ray tracing off just for a second so I can get the positioning right. And you can see I can rotate this around and I can position this perfectly. And this is going to be actually on the bottle itself. So I could kind of have it off there. And then if I wanted to rotate the bottle and flip it up and have it in an interesting angle or whatever, that is something that I can still go and do. I can then turn on that plane again. And you can see if I turn on ray tracing, when you add a surface, it just, you get to kind of see the shadows and everything. It just makes everything look a bit more realistic if it's going to be like a mock-up you're creating. Let's go for a different material for that surface. And we're going to bring the roughness all the way down. And if I bring it even further down, it depends probably on the color as well. There you go. If I use a darker color, look at that. You can actually see the reflection of the bottle in the surface, which just looks awesome, looks really cool. And Illustrator just can't reproduce those same reflections and metallic effects and even glass that Adobe Dimension can. So that is why I would go this extra step and bring this into Adobe Dimension. Now we could even go and add a light. We've got the environment light already, but we can add a light. And yeah, there's lots we could do with that. I'm going to turn this off for now and just recenter the bottle. And we're going to go ahead and save this just in case anything happens. I'll save that to the desktop. And we're going to go to render. We'll go for high. You can see the samples are a bit lower here, so we could crank that up to 64. And we'll render that as a PSD. And again, we'll give it a render and see how long it takes. And that one was surprisingly quick, actually. So let's open this up in Photoshop. There we go. And we get a good look at our wine bottle with our vector graphic mocked up on it. So we did the modeling correctly in Adobe Illustrator. We then imported it into Adobe Dimension and we then rendered that out. And now we have this in Photoshop. And like we did before, we can go and change the color of the background. Yeah, the background and various other things. And then we could go ahead and continue to retouch this. So if I wanted to take this bottle and adjust the colors or the shadows or brighten this up, I can then go and start playing around with different adjustment layers until I get something that I'm happy with. And there we go, that wraps up the course. So thank you so much for checking it out, and to Envato for having me here on the channel once again. Always a pleasure. Take care, and I'll see you next time.